I'm Olivia, 29, and just a few weeks ago, I became a millionaire overnight after buying a winning slip on a whim. I had no idea what was coming, and I refused to give half of my winnings to my sister Rachel, the golden child in our family. Everything fell apart. The chaos hit a whole new level when I came home to find my mom burning my lottery check, while my dad coldly remarked, "If you can't share, you won't get anything at all." But their smug faces quickly turned to shock when I started bursting into laughter. I'll explain why, but first, tell me where you're watching from. Hit that subscribe button, and get ready for a twist in this family drama that no one saw coming. Growing up in our small town house in Indiana wasn't exactly like the perfect childhood you see in family sitcoms. From the moment Rachel was born when I was 6, it became clear who the favorite child was. While most parents try to hide their favoritism, mine didn't even try to pretend. When Rachel wanted dance classes, they found a way to make it happen. But when I needed a scientific calculator for my higher-level math class, I had to work extra hours at the neighborhood grocery. Rachel's art display was proudly posted on the walls while my academic awards got barely a glance. Oh, nice, Olivia, but did you see what Rachel did today? Don't get me wrong, my parents weren't cruel. They provided the basics, and sometimes they showed genuine interest in my life, but the imbalance was always there. As we got older, it only got worse. Rachel dropped out of university to find herself, and my parents financially supported her through 3 different fields and 5 job changes. Meanwhile, I worked my way through school, kept my academic grant, and graduated with a mountain of student debt. By the time I hit my early 30s, I had built a pretty stable life for myself. I worked as a marketing coordinator for a medical organization, had a modest but cozy flat in the city, and had just enough savings to treat myself to an occasional dinner out or weekend getaway. I wasn't rich. Student loans still took up a huge chunk of my budget. But I was proud of how far I had come on my own. That midweek started like any other. I stopped to fill up my car at a fuel stop on the way home from work, mentally calculating how much gas I could afford until payday. At the register, I impulsively grabbed a winning slip, something I rarely did. Maybe 2 or 3 times a year when the jackpot announcement made the news. But that day felt different. The cashier handed me the ticket with a grin. Lightning. Has to strike somewhere, right? I laughed as I tucked the ticket into my wallet, not thinking much about it. That evening, ate leftovers and scrolled through social media while half watching TV. When the jackpot announcement came on, I remembered my ticket. I didn't expect anything but the usual disappointment. But then I matched the first number, then the second. By the third, my pulse began quickening. The fourth number matched. The fifth. When the final number matched, I froze. I couldn't breathe. I checked and double-checked the ticket. Sure, I was misreading something. But there it was, every number was correct. The jackpot was $2.5 million. I just sat there in speechless pause for what felt like forever, staring back and forth between the ticket and the screen. Finally, I took a photo of the ticket, placed it in a plastic bag, and tucked it into my copy of Great Expectations on the bookshelf, the safest place I could think of at that moment, trembling. I called my best friend Lucy. "You need to come over now. I'm not joking." She arrived a short while later, clearly worried. "What's wrong? You okay?" I didn't say a word. I just showed her the ticket and the numbers I'd written down. "Holy cow," she whispered, her eyes wide. "Olivia, is this real?" I asked quietly, barely believing it myself. "Can you check it again? I think I'm hallucinating." Lucy pulled out her phone and compared the winning numbers to my ticket. "It's real. Oh my God, it's real. You just won $2.5 million. The night was a blur of joyful thrill, shock, and nervous energy. Lucy stayed with me, and we talked until the early morning. We dreamed of all the things I could do: pay off my student loans, buy a house, not just any house, but one with a yard, travel, donate to causes I care about. The next day, I called in sick to work and got in touch with the National Lottery. The lottery representatives confirmed I needed to come to their headquarters to verify the ticket and begin the claim process. Rachel drove me since I was too nervous to get behind the wheel. At the lottery office, officials verified my ticket and identity, explained the process, and informed me about my options. A lump sum payment, less after taxes but immediately available, or annuity payments over several years. They also arranged for a ceremonial big check photo opportunity, though they explained that the actual funds would be processed through their financial department and would take approximately 2 weeks. As I posed for photos with the oversized check, the reality finally started to sink in. My life had changed forever in an instant, but I had no idea how it would test my relationships and reveal truths about my family that I had always suspected but never wanted to confirm. With the initial verification complete and the ceremonial photos taken, I returned home with a folder full of paperwork, a copy of the novelty check for my records, and a head spinning with possibilities. The lottery officials had strongly advised keeping my windfall private until the funds were secured and proper financial and security measures were in place. Winners often find themselves besieged by long-lost relatives, investment opportunities. In charity cases, the lottery representative had warned, consider carefully who you tell and when. I knew she was right, but I also felt a strange obligation to tell my family. Despite our complicated relationship, they were still my parents, and despite the favoritism, Rachel was still my sister. I'm not proud of, also wanted them to see that I had succeeded in this unexpected way. Maybe now they would finally see me after a few days of deliberation. I decided to share my news during Sunday dinner at my parents' house. A monthly tradition I maintained more out of duty than enjoyment. I arrived early, helping my mom prepare the meal while mentally rehearsing how I would tell them. You seem different today, my mom observed, eyeing me as she chopped vegetables. Did something happen at work? You could say something. Happened, I replied, unable to suppress a small smile. But let's wait until everyone's here. My dad joined us, asking about my apartment's persistent plumbing issues, problems I would soon be able to leave behind forever. When we sat down to eat, I took a deep breath and decided it was time. I have some news, I began, my heart pounding. Something pretty incredible happened last week. I won the state lottery. My parents stared at me in disbelief. The lottery. My dad repeated, like $20 bucks. No, I said, my voice steadier than I expected. The state lottery. It matched. All 6 numbers, it's $2.5 million. The silence that followed was profound. Then both my parents erupted in exclamations of shock and congratulations. My mom actually got up to hug me, something that rarely happened in our family. Oh my goodness, Olivia, she exclaimed. This is unbelievable. Wait until Rachel. Here's this, and there it was. Not even a full minute of celebration before my sister was mentioned. As if on cue, the front door opened and Rachel swept in, fashionably late as usual. Sorry I'm late, traffic was awful. What did I miss? My mom practically tripped over herself, rushing to deliver the news. Olivia won the lottery. It's $2.50 million. Rachel's expression shifted rapidly from surprise to excitement to something more calculating. She hugged me with unusual enthusiasm. That's amazing, Olivia. We're going to have so much fun with this. I felt a knot forming in my stomach at her use of we. Before I could respond, my dad chimed in. This is perfect timing, actually. Rachel, tell your sister about your situation. Rachel at least had the decency to look slightly embarrassed. It's not a big deal, really. I'm just in a bit of a financial bind with the business. The business was her latest venture, an online boutique selling overpriced bohemian clothing that she'd started 6 months ago. After abandoning her job at a marketing firm, I'd already heard from my parents that it wasn't going well. It's more than a bit of a bind, my dad corrected. The credit card debt alone is nearly $30,000, and then there's the inventory loan. Dad, please, Rachel interrupted, shooting him an annoyed look before turning back to me with a practiced smile. But hey, that's not important right now. This is about your amazing news. Though, if you were thinking about helping, family, I wouldn't say no. I sat there, food forgotten, as I processed what was happening. Not a single question about how I felt about winning. No inquiries about my plans or dreams, just an immediate pivot to how my windfall could solve. Rachel's problems, I haven't even received the money yet, I said carefully. There's a whole process, and I need to speak with financial advisors about the best way to use it. They acted as if it were already decided. Family helps family, and with so much money, you can easily spare enough to clear Rachel's debts and give her business a proper chance. My father said? The knot in my stomach tightened. I haven't made any decisions yet, I replied. This just happened, and I'm still processing everything. What's there to process? My dad asked, his tone shifting from celebratory to something harder. Your sister needs help, and now you can provide it. That's what family does. What about my student loans? I countered. Or the fact that I've been living paycheck to paycheck while trying to build some kind of security for myself? Don't I deserve to take care of my needs first? Don't be selfish, Olivia, my mom said, her voice taking on the disappointed tone I knew all too well. Your sister has a real business with real potential. This could be her big break. And what about my big break? I asked, feeling a lifetime of resentment bubbling to the surface. For once in my life, something amazing has happened to me, and immediately it becomes about Rachel. Rachel's expression turned hurt. I can't believe you're being like this. If I won, I would share with you without hesitation. The hypocrisy of that statement was almost laughable. When Rachel had received a $10,000 inheritance from our grandmother 3 years ago, she spent it all on a luxury vacation to Bali, without so much as offering to take any of us to dinner. The rest of the meal devolved into tense conversation, with my parents alternating between guilt trips and thinly veiled demands. By the time I left, the joy of my windfall had been thoroughly tarnished. Instead of celebrating with my family, I drove home, fighting back tears of frustration and disappointment. Once home, I poured myself a glass of wine and called Lucy. That bad, huh? Huh? She asked after I recounted the dinner disaster. They didn't even wait 5 minutes before making it about Rachel, I said, my voice breaking. Not a single question about what this means for me or what I might want to do with my own money. I'm not surprised, but I'm still sorry. Lucy replied gently. What are you going to do? I took a deep breath. Exactly what? I planned before dinner, pay off my debts, secure my future, and make smart decisions. And apparently set some very firm boundaries with my family. Little did I know how severely those boundaries would be tested in the coming days. The morning after the disastrous family dinner, my phone began ringing at 7:30 a.m. It was my mom. I'd been thinking about our conversation last night. She began without preamble. I think you were just overwhelmed, which is understandable. But now that you've had time to sleep on it, I'm sure you see how important it is to help your sister. I pinched the bridge of my nose, already feeling a headache forming. Mom, it's not even 8 o'clock, and I'm getting ready for work. Can we talk about this later? What's there to talk about? She replied. This is what family does, Olivia. Your father and I have always taught you girls to support each other. The irony of the statement was not lost on me. I need to go. We'll discuss this another time, I said, already reaching for the phone to end the call. Before she could respond, I hung up and silenced my phone. I needed space to think clearly without the constant pressure at work. I met with my supervisor and vaguely mentioned that I might need to take some personal time in the coming weeks to deal with a family situation. I wasn't ready to disclose my win to my workplace, especially since the funds hadn't been transferred yet during my lunch break. I checked my phone to find 3 missed calls from my mom, 2 from my dad, and a text from Rachel. Hey sis, Just wanted to say I totally understand you needing time to process everything. No pressure, but when you're ready to talk, I have some spreadsheets showing exactly how much I need to clear my debts and get the business profitable. Love you. I closed the message without responding. That afternoon, I contacted a financial advisor recommended by the Lottery Commission, someone experienced in working with sudden wealth situations. We scheduled an appointment for the following day. That evening, the calls continued. My father's voicemail was particularly pointed. Olivia, your mom is very upset by your behavior. We raised you better than this. Call us back immediately so we can discuss how you're going to help your sister. I didn't return the calls. Instead, I researched financial planning for lottery winners and made notes of questions to ask during my appointment. The next morning, my financial advisor, Ms. Thornton, walked me through the realities of my winnings. After taxes, the lump sum would be closer to $1.4 million, still life-changing. But not the full $2.5 million advertised. Her first priority was establishing an emergency fund and paying off high-interest debts, she advised. Then we can discuss diversified investments for long-term growth and security. When I mentioned my family's expectations, she frowned. Unfortunately, this is very common with lottery winners. I always advise my clients to establish clear boundaries early. Any gifts to family should be carefully considered and formally documented to avoid ongoing expectations. I left her office with a preliminary financial plan and a stronger resolve to protect my newfound security. But my family wasn't making it easy. That evening, I received a group text from my mom, including both my father and Rachel. We're all getting together tomorrow evening at 7 to discuss the family financial plan now that Olivia has come into this blessing. Olivia, please bring whatever paperwork you have so far so we can understand the timeline. I stared at the message in disbelief. It's the audacity of scheduling a family financial planning meeting without even consulting me was staggering. I replied simply, I won't be attending. My financial decisions are my own to make. The response was immediate and heated. My father called, and when I didn't answer, he left a voicemail. Your behavior is completely unacceptable. After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us. By turning your back on your own sister when she needs help. I'm extremely disappointed in you. The barrage continued through the next day. Rachel tried a different approach, sending a long emotional text about how her business was her dream and how, with just a small portion of my winnings, she could make it successful and pay me back someday. Meanwhile, I returned to the lottery, commissioned to finalize my decision to take the lump sum payment. I participated in the official big check ceremony for their press materials, holding the oversized novelty check while cameras flashed. The lottery officials again reminded me that the actual funds would be processed within 2 weeks after the ceremony. I stopped by a secure post office box I had rented and deposited the ceremonial check, along with copies of all my lottery documentation. The originals were stored in a safe deposit box at my bank. I was taking no chances with these important papers when I arrived home that evening. I found my parents and Rachel sitting in their car outside my apartment building. My stomach dropped as I parked and reluctantly approached them. We need to talk, my father said firmly. Since you wouldn't come to us, we've come to you. I glanced around the parking lot, aware that this was not a conversation I wanted to have in public. Fine, but I have nothing new to say. Once inside my small apartment, the tension was palpable. My mom immediately began examining the space with thinly veiled disapproval, while my father positioned himself commandingly in the center of the living room. Rachel perched on the edge of my couch, looking uncomfortable but determined. This has gone on long enough, my father began. You've had time to process your good fortune, and now it's time to discuss how this will benefit the family. Specifically, my mother added, how much you'll be giving to Rachel too. Clear her debts and properly fund her business. I took a deep breath. I've thought about this a lot, and I've decided that I need to secure my own future first. I have student loans to pay off, retirement to plan for, and student loans. My father interrupted incredulously. You're going to be a millionaire? Who cares about student loans? I do, I replied firmly. I've worked hard to stay afloat with those payments for years, and the money isn't as much as you think after taxes, but still plenty to help Rachel. Rachel only needs about $80,000 to clear everything and have a proper marketing budget, my mom insisted. Rachel leaned forward. Olivia, I only need about $80,000 to clear everything and have a proper marketing budget. That's nothing compared to what you're getting. $80,000 is not nothing, I countered. And what happens when that runs out? Will you need another infusion of cash in 6 months? That won't happen, Rachel insisted though. Her eyes slid away from mine. This is different. I just need a proper chance. Like the proper chance you had with graphic design or interior decorating or becoming a yoga instructor. I couldn't keep the bitterness from my voice. Each time mom and dad supported you financially, and each time you abandoned it when it got difficult. That's enough, my father said sharply. Your sister is trying to build something of her own. All she needs is adequate capital, which you now have in abundance. This is about family responsibility, Olivia. Where was this family responsibility when I was working 2 jobs to pay for college? I asked, years of resentment finally spilling over. Where was it when I needed help with the down payment for a car so I could get to work? You've always had different standards for Rachel and me. That's not true, my mother protested. Weakly. It is true, and we all know it, I said, my voice trembling slightly. For once in my life, something good has happened to me, and I deserve to enjoy it without guilt or manipulation. The argument continued for over an hour, growing increasingly heated. My parents cycled through guilt, anger, and even attempts. At negotiation, what about $40,000 instead? Rachel alternated between playing the victim and making veiled accusations about my character. Finally, emotionally exhausted, I asked them to leave. I've made my decision. I won't be bullied or manipulated into changing my mind. My father's face hardened. This is your attitude? Don't expect to remain part of this family. The words hit like a physical blow, but I stood my ground. If your acceptance is conditional on me giving away my financial security, then maybe that's for the best. After they left, I collapsed onto my couch, emotionally drained but oddly relieved. I had finally stood up for myself after decades of accepting second-place status in my own family. But I knew this wasn't over, not by a long shot. I called Rachel and asked if I could stay at her place for a few days. I need some space for my family, and I don't trust them not to show up again. Of course, she said immediately. Pack a bag and come over. Wine will be waiting. As I packed enough clothes for a few days, I had no idea how prophetic my distrust would prove to be. I spent 3 relatively peaceful days at Rachel's apartment, going to work as usual, but returning to her place rather than my own. My family continued their campaign of calls and texts, but I responded minimally. Usually with simple variations of, my decision is final. On the 4th day, I realized I needed to retrieve some work documents I'd left at my apartment. Rachel offered to go with me, but she had an important meeting she couldn't miss. I'll be fine, I assured her. I'll grab what I need and be out in 10 minutes. I chose my lunch break, thinking my family would be at work or otherwise occupied. As I approached my apartment door, everything seemed normal. I unlocked it and stepped inside, immediately sensing something was wrong. There were voices coming from my living room. I froze, heart pounding, before recognizing my parents' voices. They were in my apartment for a moment. I considered backing out quietly and calling the police, but anger overrode caution. And I strode into the living room. What are you doing in my apartment? I demanded. My mother and father were standing. By my coffee table, between them a small metal trash can I recognized from my own kitchen. Flames were rising from what looked like paper. With a jolt of horror, I realized what was happening. My mother was burning what appeared to be my lottery check. My father turned to me, his expression hardening. My father's expression was cold and determined. If you won't share, you won't get a penny. I rushed forward, but the damage was already done. The paper was mostly ash now, flames consuming what little remained. My mother stepped back, a look of grim satisfaction on her face. "Now we can discuss a fair arrangement," she said. "Since you'll need to reapply for the prize." I stared at them in shock, my mind racing to process what had just happened. How had they gotten in? What exactly had they burned? And most importantly, did they really think this would work? "How did you get into my apartment?" I managed to ask, my voice surprisingly steady despite the adrenaline coursing through. We still had the spare key you gave us last year when you had the flu," my father replied matter-of-factly. "You never asked for it back. The violation of my space, the calculated nature of their actions, it was almost too much to comprehend." And yet, as the initial shock began to fade, something unexpected happened. I started to laugh. It began as a small chuckle and quickly grew into full-blown laughter. My parents exchanged confused glances, clearly unprepared for this reaction. "What's so funny?" my mother demanded. "You think this is a joke?" I've struggled to compose myself, wiping tears from my eyes. "Actually, yes, this is hilarious. You've lost your mind," my father said, his confidence wavering slightly. "No, Finally, I found clarity. My laughter subsided, but a smile remained on my face. "Do you really think that's the actual lottery check?" Now it was their turn to look confused. My mother glanced at the smoldering remains in the trash can. "What do you mean? We saw the photos online from the lottery commission. You holding the check?" "That oversized check is a prop for photos," I explained, feeling a strange calm settle over me. "Not the actual payment method? No lottery commission hands out real checks for millions of dollars like that." Their expressions began to shift from confusion to uncertainty. "The actual payment is being processed electronically," I continued. "What you just burned was a commemorative copy I received as a souvenir. It has no monetary value whatsoever." The color drained from my mother's face. My father, always quick to bluster when challenged, shook his head. "You're lying. You're just saying that because we destroyed it." In response, I pulled out my phone and opened my email, turning the screen toward them to show a message from the Lottery Commission, confirming my electronic funds transfer was being processed. "The money will be deposited directly into an account I've set up specifically for this purpose," I said calmly. There was never a real check to burn. The silence that followed was deafening. My parents stood frozen, the reality of their failed manipulation sinking in. Finally, my mother spoke, her voice small and suddenly conciliatory. "Olivia, we were just trying to break into my apartment and destroy what you thought was my financial security. I finished for her. Yes, I can see that." She said, "You're blowing this out of proportion." My father attempted, his authoritative tone returning. "We're your parents. We're just trying to bring you to your senses by committing breaking and entering and attempted destruction of property." I shook my head in disbelief. Do you have any idea how unhinged that sounds? Just then, the front door opened and Rachel walked in carrying a takeout bag. She stopped short. When she saw me, "Oh, you're here." She looked nervously between me and our parents. "I was just bringing lunch for Mom and Dad while they talked to you. They trespassed in my apartment and tried to destroy what they thought was my lottery check," I corrected, watching her eyes widen. "I didn't know they were going to do that," she protested quickly. "They just said they were going to wait for you to come home so we could all talk again." Whether she was telling the truth or not didn't really matter anymore. The fact that any of them thought it was acceptable to enter my home without permission spoke volumes. "All of you need to leave now." My voice was steady, but there was no mistaking the finality in it. "Olivia, please," my mother began, her tone shifting to pleading. "We made a mistake. We were just so worried about the family being torn apart over money." "No," I countered. You were worried about losing access to money? You believe you're entitled to. My father started. That's exactly the problem. I interrupted. You've convinced yourselves you've done so much for me when the reality is, I've been largely on my own since I was a teenager. You're not entitled to my lottery winnings, and your actions today have shown me exactly who you are. I moved to the door and held it open. Leave now, or I'll call the police and report a breaking and entering. Your choice. They gathered their things in stunned silence. As Rachel passed me at the door, she paused. This isn't fair. You're being cruel. No, Rachel, I replied quietly. Cruel is expecting someone to sacrifice their financial security for your series of failed ventures. Cruel is supporting parents who would break into your sister's apartment to destroy her property. You've always been the favorite, and you've used that to your advantage your entire life. Ends today. After they left, I immediately called a locksmith to change my locks and began researching security systems I could install. I also called Rachel to update her on what had happened. They did what? She exclaimed. That's insane. Are you okay? Strangely, yes, I replied, surveying my apartment. I think this needed to happen. The illusion is gone now. I see them clearly for who they are, and it's actually liberating. That night, I received a flurry of texts from extended family members, aunts, uncles, and cousins, all expressing concern about the family rift and urging me to reconsider my harsh stance against my parents and sister. Clearly, my family had been busy spinning their version of events. I didn't bother responding. Instead, I focused on finishing my packing. I had already given notice at my apartment and found a short-term rental in a secure building across town. No one in my family knew the address, and I intended to keep it that way. As I sealed the last box, I felt a weight lifting from my shoulders. The money hadn't even hit my account yet. But I was already experiencing a different kind of wealthy richness, of clarity, and the luxury of finally prioritizing myself. The day after the burning incident, I took a personal day from work to handle several important matters. First, I met with a lawyer recommended by my financial advisor to discuss the legality of my family's actions and how to protect myself going forward. Breaking and entering is a criminal offense. The lawyer, Ms. Patterson, explained, as is destruction of property, even if what they destroyed was ultimately just a souvenir. I don't necessarily want to press charges, I said, still conflicted despite everything. I just want them to leave me alone. A restraining order might be appropriate, she suggested, and I'd recommend documenting everything in case their behavior escalates further. Next, I visited the bank where I'd set up the account for my lottery winnings. The bank manager assured me that all security measures were in place, including requiring in-person identification for any transactions. We've worked with lottery winners before, she explained. Your account has our highest security protocols. No one can access it without your physical presence and multiple forms of ID. As a final precaution, I contacted the Lottery Commission to alert them to my family's behavior. Unfortunately, this happens more often than you'd think, the representative said sympathetically. Rest assured, we will not discuss your winnings with anyone but you, regardless of their claimed relationship. With these safeguards in place, I returned to my newly secured apartment to finish packing for my move the following day. As I sorted through my belongings, deciding what to take and what to donate, my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize. Hello, I answered cautiously. Olivia, it's Aunt Helen. My mother's sister had always been somewhat of a neutral party in family dynamics, neither encouraging my parents' favoritism nor actively opposing it. Aunt Helen, I responded, my tone guarded. I assume you've heard some version of recent events? I've heard your mother's version. Asterisk, asterisk, she confirmed. But I've known your mother my entire life, so I can read between the lines. What really happened? Something in her voice, genuine concern without judgment, prompted me to tell Harry. Explained everything from the lottery win to the breaking and entering to the ceremonial check burning. When I finished, she was silent for a moment. They broke into your apartment and burned what they thought was your check. She finally asked, her voice a mixture of horror and disbelief. Yes, I confirmed. And they seemed to genuinely believe that would somehow force me to share the money with Rachel. Good Lord, she muttered. I knew your mom could. Be dramatic, but this is criminal behavior. The irony is, I continued, there was never an actual check to burn. The lottery doesn't work that way. The giant check from the ceremony is just for publicity photos. The real payment is processed electronically. Aunt Helen gave a short, incredulous laugh. So they committed a crime for absolutely nothing? Essentially? Yes, I said, smiling at the absurdity of it all, the look on their faces. When I explained that to them, I can imagine, she said. Listen, Olivia, I'm sorry this happened to you, and I'm sorry that your win has been tainted by all this ugliness. You deserve to enjoy your good fortune without this drama. Understanding was unexpected and touching. Thank you, Aunt Helen, I said. That means a lot. For what it's worth, she added, your mom has been calling everyone in the family trying to rally support for her side. But after hearing what really happened, I think you'll find most of us are appalled by their behavior. After we hung up, I felt a small measure of relief, knowing that at least some of my extended family understood the reality of the situation. The next day, as professional movers loaded my belongings into their truck, my phone began ringing repeatedly. It was my parents. After the fifth call in 10 minutes, I finally answered. What do you want? I asked, my patience exhausted. We need to talk, my father said, his tone notably less commanding than usual. Your mom and I have been discussing things, and we realize we may have overreacted. Overreacted, I repeated incredulously. You broke into my apartment and tried to destroy what you thought was my financial security. It's not overreacting. That's criminal. We were upset. My mom chimed in from what must have been speakerphone. We weren't thinking clearly. But we're your parents, Olivia. Surely we can move past this misunderstanding. This wasn't a misunderstanding, I corrected her. A misunderstanding is when we miscommunicate about dinner plans. What you did was deliberate and calculated. The point is, my father interjected, we want to apologize and start fresh. Family is more important than money. Agree completely, I replied, which is why I was so shocked that you were willing to destroy our relationship over money that isn't even yours. There was an uncomfortable silence before my mom spoke again. Rachel is very upset. She feels like you're punishing her for our actions. I sighed, watching as the movers carried out the last of my boxes. I'm not punishing anyone. I'm protecting myself from people who have demonstrated they don't have my best interests at heart. So what now? My father asked, You're just going to cut us off completely? For now, yes, I said firmly. I need time and space. I've arranged for my mail to be forwarded, and I'm moving today. Please don't try to contact me for a while. I'll reach out if I'm ready. You can't just disappear, my mother protested. We're your family. Family doesn't break into each other's homes and destroy their property, I reminded her. I have to go now. As I ended the call, a text came through from Rachel. I know you're angry, but you're being unfair. I had nothing to do with what Mom and Dad did. Call me when you stop being so selfish. The lack of self-awareness was staggering. I blocked her number without responding. That afternoon, as I was settling into my new apartment, modern one-bedroom in a secure building with a 24-hour dorm, and I received an email notification from my bank. The lottery funds had been deposited. It was official. I was now a millionaire. I sat on my new couch, surrounded by half-unpacked boxes, and allowed myself a moment to truly feel the significance of this change in my life. Despite all the family drama, despite the betrayal and hurt, this was still an incredible blessing. My phone buzzed with a text from Rachel. All settled in. How's the new place? It's perfect, I replied. And the money just hit my account. Champagne time. She responded immediately. I'll be there in 30 minutes, she added. We're celebrating properly this time. I awaited Rachel's arrival. I reflected on how differently everything might have unfolded if my family had simply been I. Could never have imagined how happy my family might have been for me if they had respected my autonomy and my right to make my own financial decisions. If their love had truly been unconditional, but their actions had revealed important truths, painful ones, yes, but necessary to acknowledge. And perhaps that clarity was its own kind of fortune. When Rachel arrived with champagne and takeout from my favorite restaurant, we toasted not just to my financial windfall, but to new beginnings and true friendship. Two boundaries, Rachel said, raising her glass. And to seeing people clearly, I added, clinking my glass against hers. As we ate and talked about my plans for the future, I felt a sense of peace settling over me. The money would change my life in many ways, but the most valuable change had already occurred. I had finally recognized my own worth and stood firm in protecting it. The weeks following my move were filled with a strange mix of exhilaration and adjustment. With Ms. Thornton's guidance, I systematically addressed my financial priorities. First came my student loans, nearly $68,000 worth of debt that had shadowed me since graduation. Submitting that final payment brought an unexpected emotional release. I actually cried as I clicked the Pay Off Remaining Balance button. Next, I established a robust emergency fund and set up diverse investment accounts designed for long-term growth. I purchased a modest but beautiful 3-bedroom house in a quiet neighborhood with excellent security features. Nothing extravagant or flashy, just a solid. It's a comfortable home that I owned outright with no mortgage hanging over my head. You're being remarkably sensible, Ms. Thornton commented during one of our meetings. Most clients in your position immediately buy luxury cars or take lavish vacations. I've waited too long for financial security to risk it now, I explained. Though I did book a 2-week trip to New Zealand for next month. I added with a smile, I'm not completely boring. At work, I gave my notice, explaining to my surprised supervisor that I had come into an unexpected inheritance. A small lie that seemed safer than announcing a lottery win. I agreed to stay on for 6 weeks to properly train my replacement and transition my projects through it all. I maintained my distance from my immediate family. They continued their attempts to contact me, sometimes apologetic, sometimes accusatory, but I held firm to my boundaries. I did cautiously reconnect with a few extended family members who had reached out with genuine concern. Helen and I began meeting for coffee every other week. During one such meeting, she updated me on the family situation. Your parents are telling everyone they're giving you space, she said with a knowing look. But the reality is, they're beside themselves that they can't find your new address. Have they shown any real remorse? I asked, though I already knew the answer. She shook her head. They're convinced they were justified in trying to help you see reason. Your mom actually said they did it because they love you too much to let you make such a selfish mistake. I sighed. And Rachel? Well, that's interesting, Aunt Helen said, leaning forward. Her business has officially folded. Apparently, she took out some high-interest loans that she can't repay. I'm sorry to hear that, I said, and was surprised to find I genuinely meant it. Despite everything, I didn't want my sister to suffer. Don't be too sorry, Aunt Helen replied. Your parents refinanced their house to bail her out again. They what? I was genuinely shocked. My parents were in their early 60s and had been planning to retire in the next few years. That's their retirement security. No, Aunt Helen said grimly. I tried to talk them out of it, but they insisted Rachel had no other options. She could get a job like everyone else, I pointed out. That's what I said, Aunt Helen replied. But you know how they are with her always, the exceptional child who deserves exceptional support. The conversation left me troubled. While I had maintained my boundaries, I didn't wish financial hardship on my parents. I decided to consult with Ms. Thornton about potentially setting up a small retirement fund for them, not now, but perhaps in the future when emotions had settled. Meanwhile, I was discovering the joy of financial freedom coupled with purpose. With Ms. Thornton's help, I established a modest foundation focused on providing financial literacy education to young adults. I partnered with local community colleges to offer workshops on budgeting, understanding credit, and basic investing principles. I used all the knowledge I had struggled to acquire on my own to help others. I also made anonymous donations to causes I cared about: a shelter for domestic violence survivors, the public library that had been my sanctuary growing up, and a scholarship fund for first-generation college students. These acts of giving brought me more satisfaction than any luxury purchase ever could. I wasn't just changing my own life, I was creating ripple effects that might change others' lives. 2. Rachel remained my steadfast supporter through all of these transitions. When I confessed my guilt about not helping Rachel despite having the means to do so, she provided a valuable perspective. "Your sister doesn't need a bailout," Rachel pointed out. "She needs to learn consequences. If you step in now, you're just replacing your parents as her safety net. Nothing will change." "I know you're right," I sighed. "But I still feel this nagging guilt." "That's because you're a good person," Rachel said firmly. "But being a good person doesn't mean being a doormat. You can be generous without being exploited." About 3 months after the burning incident, I received an unexpected email from Rachel. Unlike her previous messages, this one seemed more reflective. "I've been doing a lot of thinking about everything that happened," she wrote. "I realize now how entitled I must have seemed about your lottery win. The truth is, I was desperate. My business was failing, and I was too proud to admit it. That doesn't excuse my behavior or mom and dad's. But I wanted you to know that I understand better now why you reacted the way you did. I miss my sister." I read the email several times, trying to gauge its sincerity. Was this a genuine moment of growth for Rachel, or another manipulation tactic now that her financial situation had deteriorated? After careful consideration, I replied with a brief but not unkind message. "Thank you for your email, Rachel. I appreciate your reflection on what happened. I'm still processing everything and need more time before considering any kind of reconciliation. I hope you're finding your way forward." Her response came quickly. "I understand. For what it's worth, I've finally taken a regular job. Manager at Riverside Cafe. It's not glamorous, but it's stable. Take all the time you need. I'll be here if you're ready." This small evidence of Rachel taking responsibility for her own financial situation was the first positive sign I'd seen. While I wasn't ready to fully reconnect, it left me open to the possibility that genuine change might be possible eventually as my new life took shape. I found myself experiencing a profound sense of peace. My days were filled with meaningful work through my foundation, enjoyable hobbies I'd never had time for before, and genuine connections with friends and the extended family members who respected my boundaries. The wealth hadn't changed who I was at my core, still shopped sales and felt a twinge of guilt when splurging on expensive items. But it had removed the constant background anxiety about money that had been my companion for so long. More importantly, it had catalyzed a necessary transformation in how I viewed myself and my relationships. One evening, as Rachel and I enjoyed dinner on my new patio, she raised her glass in a toast to the unexpected silver lining: without the lottery, you might never have seen your family so clearly or found the strength to prioritize yourself, she said. I clinked my glass against hers, reflecting on the truth of her words. Sometimes the greatest gift isn't the money itself, I replied, but what it reveals about the people around you and about yourself. 1 year after the lottery win that changed everything, I stood in the doorway of my home office, surveying the space I'd created for myself. Large windows overlooked a garden that was just beginning to bloom with spring flowers. The walls were lined with bookshelves containing volumes I'd always wanted to read but never had time for. My desk, a beautiful antique I'd carefully restored myself, held a laptop and a neat stack of documents related to my foundation's latest financial literacy program. This room, like my new life, was entirely of my own making. Every element reflected my choices, my values, my vision, not those imposed by family expectations or financial limitations. It was a physical manifestation of the internal journey I'd undertaken over the past year. The path to healing had been days when I questioned my decisions, when the weight of family estrangement felt heavier than the relief of boundaries. There were nights when I dreamed about reconciliation scenarios, waking with a confused mixture of longing and resolve. My therapist, another investment in myself I'd made after the lottery, helped me navigate these complex emotions. Healing isn't linear, she often reminded me. And establishing healthy boundaries with family doesn't mean you've stopped loving them. It means you've started loving yourself. That perspective had been crucial as I cautiously began reconnecting with certain family members. Aunt Helen remained a steady presence, providing updates about my parents and Rachel without pressure or judgment. Through her, I learned that my parents had finally paid off the refinanced mortgage thanks to my father postponing retirement and taking on consulting work. Rachel, meanwhile, had maintained her job at the cafe and even received a promotion to manager. According to Aunt Helen, she had also joined a financial management group and was slowly working to repair her credit. These positive developments had eventually led me to accept an invitation to meet Rachel for coffee, about 8 months after our arrangement began. We chose a neutral location, a quiet cafe, halfway between our respective homes. The initial awkwardness had been palpable as we settled at a corner table. Each of us careful with our words. "You look good," Rachel had said, studying me. "Happy?" I confirmed. "I am," she replied. "Aunt Helen mentioned you're doing well at the cafe." A flash of the old Rachel appeared, a slight wince at the mention of her service industry job, but it quickly passed. "It's been a learning experience," she admitted. "What I envisioned for myself, but I'm good at it." Surprisingly, we talked carefully around the edges of the past at first, focusing on present circumstances and neutral topics. But eventually, we had to address the elephant in the room. "I'm sorry," Rachel said suddenly, interrupting a safe conversation about a new restaurant in town. "Not just for what happened with Mom and Dad, but for everything ... For always expecting to be bailed out, for never considering what you might need." The sincerity in her voice caught me off guard. "Thank you," I said simply, giving her space to continue. "When your money didn't materialize to solve my problems, I had to face some hard truths," she continued. "I've never had to deal with consequences before. Mom and Dad always fixed everything, and I let them because it was easier. It's a pattern that started when we were kids," I acknowledged. "It wasn't entirely your fault," she countered. "But I participated in it, and I benefited from it at your expense. I see that now." That first meeting ended with a tentative hug and a promise to try again in a few weeks. We'd had several more coffee dates since then, each one a little more comfortable than the last. We weren't best friends, too much history stood between us for that, but we were finding a new, more balanced way to be sisters. My parents were a more complicated matter. While I'd exchanged a few brief emails with them, I wasn't ready for in-person contact. Their apologies still carried undertones of justification, suggesting they hadn't fully recognized the gravity of their actions or the patterns that led to them. "You'll know when or if you're ready," my therapist had assured me, "and it's perfectly acceptable if that time never comes." That permission to prioritize my own well-being without guilt had been transformative. I'd spent so much of my life accommodating others' needs and expectations that establishing firm boundaries felt like learning a foreign language. But with practice, it was becoming more natural. The lottery money, while providing material security, had been merely the catalyst for this more profound personal growth. The true wealth I'd gained was in self-knowledge and self-respect. This perspective informed how I managed my financial windfall as well. Rather than defining myself by my bank account or allowing money to become my primary identity, I viewed it as ain the past year. My wealth had transformed from a simple tool for security into a resource that allowed me to make a meaningful difference. Through my foundation, I funded financial literacy programs that reached over 500 young adults. The feedback from participants was often deeply emotional. Many shared their experiences of being the first in their families to understand concepts like compound interest, investment basics, and the true cost of credit card debt. You're not just teaching them about money. One of our community college partners had told me, "You're breaking generational cycles." That remark struck a chord with me. Breaking cycles wasn't that exactly what I'd done in my own life. I moved from my office to the kitchen to prepare dinner. My phone buzzed with a text from Rachel. "Just confirmed reservations for New Zealand 2.0 next month. Pack your hiking boots." I smiled, excited about our upcoming adventure, our second trip to New Zealand, this time to explore the South Island. Rachel had been my rock throughout this transformative year, celebrating my wins and offering wisdom during moments of doubt. "Can't wait." I texted back, thinking of adding a stop in Australia this time. Her reply was immediate: "Yes, let's do it." The freedom to make such decisions, to travel, explore, and broaden my horizons was something I never took for granted. Neither was the autonomy to choose how I spent my time. In addition to managing my foundation, I'd started taking classes in furniture restoration, a hobby I'd always been drawn to but never had the chance to pursue. My dining room table was currently covered with the components of an antique radio cabinet I was bringing back to life. As I prepared a simple but delicious dinner of salmon and roasted vegetables, I reflected on how my relationship with money had evolved. The initial panic of making mistakes with my newfound wealth had been replaced with confidence in my careful decisions. The fear that wealth might change me had shifted to the realization that it had simply revealed and amplified the person I already was. Most importantly, I'd learned that while financial wealth could provide comfort and opportunity, it wasn't the most valuable currency in life. Respect, and authentic connection, those were the true treasures. And they couldn't be bought. After dinner, I settled on my porch swing with a glass of wine, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. A year ago, I couldn't have imagined the life I now lived, not just because of the financial changes, but because of the emotional freedom I had claimed. The lottery had given me $2.5 million. But my own choices had granted me something far more precious, a life aligned with my values, relationships based on mutual respect, and the quiet confidence that came from knowing my own worth. For anyone watching this who might be struggling with family boundaries or finding their own voice, I hope my story encourages you. It's never too late to recognize your value and demand that others respect it. The path isn't easy, but the peace waiting on the other side is worth every difficult step. If my journey has resonated with you, love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever had to establish difficult boundaries with loved ones? What helped you find the courage to stand firm? Share your experiences below and know that your story matters too. Don't forget to subscribe if you'd like to hear more real life stories like mine. And hit that like button if this resonated with you. Thank you for listening. And remember, sometimes the greatest twist in your story is the moment you decide to become its author.